All right. Well, good morning. There you go. Thank you so much for showing up this morning. So excited today to talk to Mr. Lumpkin, coordinator of the Global Engagement Center at the State Department. So a lot of you might not have heard of the Global Engagement Center, but you've certainly heard about what it does, which is counter extremist messaging all around the world that includes ISIS. It's not limited to ISIS. So this entire fight that we're having right now with extremism, it's taking place kinetically. It's also taking place in hearts and minds, on screens, on phones. And he is the State Department's sort of tip of the spear for that. So thank you for joining me here today. Now, before your current job, and we're going to get to ISIS and extremist messaging, what it looks like now, what it's going to look like in the future, how to stop it, and all of these issues. But first, you were, before your current job, you were the Assistant Secretary at the Defense Department for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict. Mm-hmm. And before that, you were in the private sector a little bit, but you got your start as a SEAL. Mm-hmm. You were a Navy SEAL. So I think my first question is, how does being a Navy SEAL prepare you to be more persuasive online than ISIS?
I would argue that my background does not make me more persuasive. I think that it provides me an approach to working the problem and the issue.
Okay.
As a career special operator and as the former assistant secretary, the things I realized that our special operations community, the way the tenets for which they function, it's about agility, it's about innovation, it's about flattened networks, and we're bringing those tenets to this virtual fight in social media.
Right.
It's about creating an organization that can kind of move at the speed of heat and adjust as necessary, bringing cutting-edge technology to work in this problem set.
Yeah. If you talk to General Thomas, he's the new head of Special Forces, he'll talk about changing role for Special Forces, for special operators around the world, as kind of, in many ways, field intelligence collectors. It's always been an aspect of the role, but he feels like it's something that's growing. We've got folks spread all around the world that are learning about communities, learning about actual people, doing really pioneer, almost intelligence work. And that's a huge aspect of this too, is learning about the places where we want our message to be persuasive.
Absolutely. I think the key is you have to understand your audience, right?
Right.
And you have to know where they're coming from. And the audience is, while it's a global problem, the audience and their concerns, their grievances, their viewpoints are all local. I think it was Tip O'Neill once said that all politics is local.
Right.
Well, all messaging is local too.
Yeah.
So it has to be tailored through the right lens to the right audience at, frankly, the right time.
Yeah.
So it's about understanding your audience and how you can kind of dissect it and to bring clarity to it so you can create messaging opportunities that resonate with them to ultimately to shape thought and modify behavior.
Yeah. So on that, modifying behavior is a difficult thing to measure. There's a lot of different potential ways to measure how successful this endeavor is right now. I think that the last published numbers I saw for ISIS were that they were around 12,000. It's about half of what they were a year ago. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I think that's what open source reporting is. That's, I think, about right.
Oh, damn. But they've also really dropped off on their media activity as they've had to focus more on digging deeper tunnels to avoid airstrikes and stuff like that. So given that there's been good momentum against the Islamic State and you've got these signs of victory, how do you say that clearly points to success in my endeavor, what I'm trying to do with the messaging, or is it more of like a correlational victory? What does success just look like?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Is that, first of all, as I clearly recognize from my days at DoD, is that we're not going to kill our way to victory here. It's just not going to happen that way. But that said, we're not going to message our way to victory either.
Right.
So this is truly a layered approach, and I'm focused largely on starving ISIL and groups like it of recruits.
Right.
So this is about preventing people from joining to begin with. So again, it truly is a layered approach, and we have to have a balance of resources to make sure that we are putting the right effort forward. An example is we've seen almost a 400% increase in funding towards this effort over the past 2 years. So we've seen a fourfold increase.
From who?
From the U.S. government.
Yeah.
We're putting against the counter-messaging problem set.
Okay.
And I think that is we're now getting the resources to actually effectively operate in this space. And we're using those resources to bring in talent from the private sector.
Yeah.
We're using it to bring in cutting-edge technology that lets us look at data the way we need to look at data. We're building the tools, the software, the people, and we're building a network of partners. Because we do have a networked approach, because we recognize that while we may have a really, really good message, we're not always the most credible messenger to deliver it.
Right.
So and I think that's the key is in order to do this effectively, and part of this building a network is to actually train our partners and to help them understand the most effective ways to message.
Right. So this is a common complaint against the predecessor of, in many ways, this endeavor, the Think Again, Turn Away campaign from state, was that it did have this almost maternal, parochial feel. It came branded from the State Department. It looked like, kind of a librarian admonishing you to stay away from jihadism, and it didn't really work in the places it was intended to work, and you're describing something that is far more fueled by the input of partners and far more fueled by data. So I guess first, what is the data telling you, and how have you seen ISIS messaging change since activities picked up in Mosul, since they begin to lose territory? How does what they're saying to the outside world and present themselves, how has that evolved?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a couple of pieces here, is that as we work the data piece, and it gives us the ability, instead of just throwing a message out and hope it lands, we can actually, I call that kind of meat cleaver messaging, is you throw it out there and hopefully it hits the right audience. And so we have the ability, and I'll use an example of something we've started this year, and this is using Facebook ads. I can go within Facebook, I can go grab an audience. I'll give a hypothetical. I can pick country X. I need age group 13 to 34. I need people who've liked, whether it's Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi or any other set, and I can shoot and hit them directly with messages. In some places in the world, it's literally pennies a click to do. So you have the ability to actually manage and identify and see your audience based on their social media preferences. Right. That said, we do have challenges in working with big data. Some of our challenges are we have the 1974 Privacy Act, for example, was created to make sure that we're not influencing, collecting data on U.S. citizens. Well, with IP addresses, and by definition the World Wide Web is worldwide, right. There is no passport that goes with it that says that this is an American citizen on the other end, or it doesn't matter if it's an example, a Tunisian in the United States, a Tunisian citizen in the United States, or an American citizen in Tunisia. I don't have the ability to discern that. Right. So therefore, I have trouble working big data and to grab that personally identifiable information and slice it and dice it. And this is why the Facebook ads that I mentioned are a kind of a fundamental change for us for very low investment to be highly targeted towards the enemy. Yeah. So I want to come back to ISIS and how their messaging has changed as circumstances for them have changed. But on this issue of how would you characterize Facebook's partnership with you? Is it, they've got a global audience, they've got a lot of people that they have to pay attention to, and they have to be careful in how visibly they partner with the US government on some of this stuff. At the same time, keeping jihadist material off their website is certainly in their commercial interests too. How would you characterize first their partnership with you, and also just the broader Silicon Valley-based social media industry? What pushback do you receive? Where do you find signs for encouragement? I'll tell you what, I believe we have a very good working relationship. It's very collegial. I fully respect their client, privacy,
Yeah.
concerns and how they work that. They do have from a business perspective, to ensure their brand remains viable and credible, to make sure that they police themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look at what Twitter has done, for example, and shutting down the number of accounts that they've shut down that have got jihadi propaganda and such on them, what Facebook is doing to police, I think that they're working this problem.
Yeah.
And so again, I think we have a good working relationship.
Twitter also made the decision to shut down the big data pipeline for a lot of people in government. I think that now only DHS has access to the full Twitter stream. Did that affect you guys at all? And
well, our job at the Global Engagement Center is to coordinate, synchronize, and integrate U.S. government messaging efforts.
so yes.
So I mean, I say this is that I kind of heard the interagency cats.
Yeah.
So if DHS has access to something and I need something out of it, again, we have a very good working relationship, so I have the ability to grab what I need from them.
Okay. All right. See, it's important because there's a lot of different pieces of legislation that might stand in the way of this mission being accomplished as easily as it might be accomplished. One of them we were talking a little bit about is U.S. Law 50 Code 3093. It's a very obscure piece of legislation. Smith-Mundt is
Smith-Mundt.
Right, Smith-Mundt, and it prohibits basically the U.S. government from sending out information to sway public opinion about political subjects. Intended, the U.S. government cannot influence United States political processes, public opinion, or media through this law. It's the law that doesn't let us send propaganda to citizens. And that totally makes sense in like 1940, but when you're talking about a social networking platform that's based in Silicon Valley that has subscribers around the world, many of which might be accessing the site through virtual private networks from a country where they're not physically located, then all of a sudden that becomes a very tricky challenge for you. So understanding you don't make policy, if you were to appear before a bunch of policymakers in a hearing and they said, what can we do legislatively to make your job easier? What would you tell them about the Privacy Act, about Smith-Mundt, about anything?
I think the important thing to realize is you have kind of three different pieces that are working right now. For example, you have public affairs,
right,
which is targeted towards the U.S. population, right, to get the message out. You have public diplomacy, which is resident at the State Department, which is focused on kind of influencing foreign audiences. Then you have information operations that exist at Department of Defense that support military objectives.
Right.
Each one is governed by a different set of authorities that were done at different times.
Right.
For example, the 1974 Privacy Act, if you go and read about the Privacy Act, it basically talks about files in cabinets. Right, and so that's exactly what it talks about. Yeah. And so we interpret that and we move it forward into the hyper-connected world we live in today, where messages move at the truly so fast that you have to be on it right now to do it, and it's about and big data is fundamentally different than it was.
Yeah.
So in a perfect world, if I had more ability to work with the PII, that personally identified information, and had access to big data, I could actually do more targeting, scalpel, and be able to dissect audiences more definitively to make sure that I could guarantee that I would hit the right message to the right audience at the right time.
Yeah.
So the best I can do right now is to have access to big data, is to use the analytic tools on the social media platforms, the Facebooks, and the others, because when you purchase advertisement, the analytics become available to you, so I can see and target my message to specific audiences.
Yeah. So in many ways, there's a lot of different shareholders that could have influence on your ability to access this. Facebook could change its terms of use, for instance, and let its users know about that. Then they could opt in or opt not. There could be legal changes. There could simply be technological changes where you have big data, perhaps artificial intelligence and neural networking to help discern citizens, people around the world, a potential target for messaging, a potential jihadist, and there's perhaps a technological solution as well. And that's, I think, sort of the future. That's the future of where all of this is going, is the application of artificial intelligence and neural networking.
Because the point that I grab onto every day is that while I'm in the messaging business, I'm really in the big data business.
Right.
This is about managing data. I mean, and I use the example regularly about Amazon. For example, Amazon, based on your buying habits and your social media habits, will tell you what you want to buy next.
Yeah.
And so, and that is there. It's about influencing, purchase, needs and desires.
Yeah.
So they create expectations of what you want to buy.
Yeah.
And I believe that if we have access to the big data and can fully manipulate it, we can use the same type of methodologies to make sure we're hitting the right audience.
Yeah. See, this is a key point, because ISIS doesn't have access to big data, but they do targeted messaging. And that's the big difference between why they're so effective versus a kind of old hat jihadist group like Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda would put out pieces of propaganda, these grainy videos. They were ugly, but they sort of affected some people. ISIS finds people that might be sympathetic to their cause on social media. They engage in them in a very personal, very one-on-one way. They learn about the target, and then they slowly move you into the fold. And in order to compete with that, we rely on technology, we rely on resources, and we rely on partners. So you were talking a little bit earlier about there's partners around the world in communities of interest, in Muslim communities, in Mosul, that help you achieve this. And you can't say too much about who they are, because it might affect their mission. But can you give me a sense of how diverse your set of partners is that's helping you with this messaging?
Yeah, I'll kind of give two extremes here. First of all, I mean, I have some partners that are nation states and who have messaging capabilities, and we work with them to develop their capabilities, and we share content back and forth, and to make sure that, because what works in one area may be able to work somewhere else, and what I don't want to do is to get into creating new content all the time if there's content or messaging, persuasive messaging that resonates in one place that I could use somewhere else. So there's some economies there at the nation state. But we also have partners that are, for example, a disc jockey in a respective country who's got 200,000 Facebook followers. We can help them to formulate messaging that resonates to the local population. And they do this because they believe. They believe that ISIL and these violent extremist groups are a cancer on society. And so we have partners that we work with them to develop their capabilities, and we give them the analytic tools to make sure that their message is resonating.
So having a good, functional, I think, two-way relationship with different Muslim communities around the world. That's key to this endeavor, and I mean, would you even say to national security?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely believe that. But the Muslim communities are just one of the communities that we need to be connected with. There's the community of families, of families of folks who have joined ISIL and organizations like it, who are helping other families. There's a great network that kind of created itself in Europe called the Families Against Terrorism and Extremism. And this is a group that goes out and teaches families how to recognize when somebody is moving down this pathway to ultimately lead into violent extremist behavior. And but there's lots of potential partners out there, and we're trying to work to harness them all, because this is a global kind of movement of where things are going. If you look at, we have 7 billion people on the planet, and we've got about, what was the number you used, 12,000 earlier? So you've got 12,000 people that are driving the agenda of 7 billion.
Right.
So again, and that's why we have to work on this together through our partners, but there's many people who recognize this. But the key about partners, as I try to allude to, is that one size doesn't fit all. I mean, each one is different, and there's different dynamics that go back and forth with our partnerships.
Well, understanding that it's not a monolith. When you talk to them, what do they tell you first of all about what's going on in Iraq, Syria, and the broader Middle East, in terms of the success of ISF there, in terms of the loss of the Islamic State? So first that. What are you hearing from them?
Different things from different people. It really depends on where they're sitting. I mean, there's people who seem, what we're getting is that so thankful that the Iraqi government has come into Mosul, and now they see the opportunity for a real transition to a peaceful Mosul once again.
Yeah.
At the same time, there are concerns that ISIL will rebrand itself and become something different, which does concern them. So it's about, again, as Secretary Carty at DOD says, it's about definitively defeating this organization, because we have to keep in mind that ISIL is a rebrand or reconfiguration of Al Qaeda in Iraq.
Right.
So it became something else, and we have to make sure that we fully recognize the trends, and we follow these through social media. The intelligence community does their piece to make sure they don't rebrand themselves.
How are they attempting to rebrand themselves? What is ISIS's next phase, and how do you do messaging in northern Iraq and Syria after they're gone to keep them from coming back?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I don't have a crystal ball. Right. So we don't always do a really good job on forecasting what's going to happen next. Right. But I would argue that for my position is that as people move down, this, I call it the pathway of radicalization, is that we do, in places in the world, we do need change. It needs to change, but doing it through peaceful means is much more enduring and much more effective than violent radical change. So I think that's the message we hit. I think that's how we prevent them from trying to morph and become something different. Because what we have to make sure we don't do is that I call it the say-do gap.
Okay.
Do you say one thing and do something different? We have to make sure there is no gap. What we're saying is what we're doing. And sit there into promising, unicorns and puppies to people in the world is just unrealistic. I'm not going to overhaul, their respective healthcare systems. We're not going to. We just can't do that.
Right.
So I think what we have to do is talk about social change, empower peaceful resolution to problems, and to make sure that we're all working together in harmony.
Do you see ISIS competing with you in any way on that? Like, for a long time, their entire thing was, come to Syria and Iraq. We are going to create this enormous caliphate. It will be wonderful. The healthcare is going to be fantastic. We're going to pave the streets with gold. None of that happened. Now they can't really say that with as much credibility. So what are they saying now? Just destroy the West and eternity comes in one.
That is, and in some venues, that is the message that's going on. Inspiring people to attack the West. Don't necessarily come to Iraq and Syria and join in the fight, but rather, take up arms regardless of what it is, whether it's a baseball bat or something in your respective nation, and wreak havoc.
Can they be as persuasive in that argument as they were in telling people to come to Iraq and Syria?
I think here's the challenge: is they're not creating new audiences. They're preying on vulnerable people.
Right.
So they're, as an organization, they're nothing more than predators.
Right.
So if I kind of think of it sometimes like a big gang that's trying to inspire people to do things. So you end up with this very distributed threat base based on inspired attacks. And this is where the challenge, again, it goes back to that number of playing the numbers game of 7 billion and 12,000.
Right. So if we can target those vulnerable communities with a message that appeals directly to their local circumstance, to their local life, and appeals to them in a way that doesn't look like it comes from far off in Washington, but speaks in a language that they recognize, then we're going to be successful.
I believe so, but it's a layered approach. That unto itself isn't the panacea that's going to solve all this. It's about U.S. diplomatic efforts. It's about supporting mill-to-mill relations with respective nations. There's a policing effort. There's a community, responsibility.
Right.
This is truly one of those things that it is a global challenge to be, when you have the world population being held captive by such a small number of folks. But I think what we've got is the situation when you have to respect the connectivity that this group has with people globally.
Yeah.
Because, and it is illustrative of the hyper-connected nature of the world, where you can influence somebody in a completely different country that you've never met, never seen, but again, predators.
Yeah. So, not to get super political, and we're not going to, but how have your conversations with your partners changed since November 8th? What are you hearing from them about Muslims, about the way they're treated in the United States, and the future of a pluralistic Western society?
Nothing different than I did on November 7th.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's been, and again, what I always tell people is that, you know, the U.S. political process is the U.S. political process.
Right.
I mean, it's just freedom of speech is a wonderful thing, and we should embrace it. And so I have not spoken to one partner who told me that they had massive concerns.
Okay.
So,
because it's
but again, and the ones I've spoken to, nobody's articulated.
Okay. Well, there you go. Because they're talking about their local situation.
That's correct.
Right.
Again, it goes back to that all messaging is local.
Yeah.
And so what happens here in Washington, D.C., or any of the capitals globally, largely doesn't affect some of these places in the world.
But we must insist that it does. We're in Washington. That has to happen. Okay. So you've been, January is when you came in. A successful year for you next year, what would that look like?
I think it's be able to further dissect big data. I think it would be completely flesh out our team and fully staff. Where I'm running about 55 to 60% of the staff. It takes a long time to build staff.
Okay.
Because a lot of what we do is we're an interagency body. So I have detailees from the interagency. But the people I bring from the private sector, they need security clearances to work in the space, and it takes that we all know it takes a long time to get a security clearance. So I'd like to see the staff be fully fleshed out and get everybody on board. So I think those, and to continue what we're doing with the advertisements, and to further target our audiences. And our resourcing is coming online, so we'll be able to have the money to hire all the people and bring in all the technology we need to bring in.
How can Silicon Valley help you with that? How can Twitter, Facebook, and outside of that?
Yeah, great question. And it's kind of not a blanket piece. It's right now there's about 36 to 3,700 analytic tools to analyze social media.
Right.
So for me, if I looked at 5 of them a day, it would take a long time to get through,
right?
All of them, and they change every day. New ones are being developed. So to me, as industry, I welcome the opportunity for industry to come in and tell me what they're doing and what they're working on, and so I can see how I can best leverage their capabilities to focus on this mission set. But this is truly, and at the same time, it's my responsibility to share with them my challenges, to help them develop tools that will ultimately help me and to target these audiences that we want to target.
Yeah, and it seems like there's some growing receptiveness, especially to this mission.
Absolutely, because I think people recognize that whether it's the social media platforms, that they need to protect their brands.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as they do that, they can help us and deal with this challenge internationally.
Yeah. So it's going to be impossible to completely destroy extremism. This seems an incredibly through the application of micro-targeting and big data on social networks. Like that sounds a bit too ambitious. But what can we realistically achieve in terms of a victory against extremism? Can we just reduce its lethality? Can we stop the next ISIS? Or can we just deal with it better?
Yes. I mean, to all of those. I mean, that's exactly what we need to do. Yeah. But we have to prevent, first of all, we can't seed the space. Okay. You know, we need to make sure that we're revealing the true nature of these organizations, because they're not constrained by the law, ethics, the truth. So I think the key is for us to show the hypocrisy frequently of what they say and what they are. And if we can be influential, one of the most influential messaging sources we've actually realized is defectors. These are people who've left the organization, who joined for some reason or another, and got there and realized, hey, this isn't what I thought I was getting into.
Yeah.
It was a bait and switch.
Yeah.
So when they come back and they're very, very credible messengers of why ISIL is a cancerous organization and is lying to them and is functioning as a predator organization.
Yeah. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Mr. Lumpkin for sharing the work with you this evening today.